Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the For the Future podcast. Our first guest is Paul Ballen, the co-founder of Paul's Homemade Ice Cream. Hope you enjoy. Okay, thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time to be on my show.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so my first question for you is, can you just explain to those who don't know, who are you and what is your story?
So I'm the founder of, I'm Paul Ballen, and I'm the founder of Paul's Homemade Ice Cream. We a gourmet ice cream business that was established when I was 21 years old. I'm now turning 32, so it's been a long adventure for me. We manufacture ice cream and have stores throughout Gauteng and KZN, and we'll be soon venturing into the Western Cape and other parts of South Africa.
Okay, so my second question for you is, what's one of the most surprising things that you learned on your journey of sort of founding and creating Paul's Homemade Ice Cream?
I think that it's sort of a tough question. I'd say that persistence and patience is key to anything. This day and age, I think a lot of people get impatient and they need instant gratification, but it's very rare for things to happen overnight. It takes lots of time and energy and good people to create a success. Generally, there are those success stories where things tend to be successful in short bouts of time, but most successful businesses and most good things in life take quite a good amount of time to take place.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So my third question for you is, what do you think has been the most difficult part about running this venture?
There have been many, many challenges. I think, firstly, South Africa is a very difficult. Well, it's a place of many opportunities. So I'm going to say that as a prefix, but I think it's a very challenging place generally to do business. And a lot of people say if you can succeed in South Africa, you can succeed anywhere in the world. The climate's very difficult. We offer a gourmet product to the market, and we have quite a limited captive market. So I think that's been quite challenging. The past 2 years have also been quite challenging times, as we know, for most businesses. Some businesses have really thrived, but in the hospitality business, we've all been under lots of pressure. Landlords have been incredibly difficult. Banks have been very difficult and unforgiving. We've dealt with challenges on many, many fronts. So I think that overall, it's been a very challenging journey, a very fun journey, and a very rewarding journey. But I think the climate makes it quite a challenging one to exist in. I think South Africa in its current state made it very difficult to succeed in. But on the other hand, if we were in maybe another country, we might not have had the same opportunities that we've had.
Yeah. So interesting that you mentioned that, because my next question actually links to it. You've kind of answered it a little bit, but what do you think are specifically the kind of challenges that an entrepreneur might face in South Africa, particularly that's different from a place like America? Because I know a lot of the time we hear stories about like success stories in America, but it's quite far from South Africa. So what do you think are some specific challenges that entrepreneurs can sort of prepare themselves for?
I think obviously the captive market. So I think entrepreneurs have to keep in mind who they're targeting, and it depends sort of on your business and your product that you're offering to market, who your target market's going to be. Obviously, you can still be very successful with a limited target market, but obviously your scale you have to have a larger scale in terms of the amount of people that you can offer your product to, and obviously your price point has to be correct. So I think that's important to take into consideration. there are obviously things that the South African entrepreneur also has to face that many entrepreneurs around the world don't have to face. The obvious ones are things like electricity, which seems like it should be it's obviously a necessity for a business like ours, but it's something that greatly affects us. And we've obviously had to make large investments to ensure that we can still manufacture our product and that we can still operate on our stores when there are electrical issues. Funding and then banks are another challenging one. In a lot of places in the world, funding is very easily accessible. There's money being thrown around for small businesses. People are interested. I think in the current South African climate of the past decade or so, I think we've been in tough times, and I think specifically in the last 2 years, it's been specifically difficult. And if a small business is looking for finance, whether it be from banks or private investors, it can be quite a challenging journey. Yeah. What else? Obviously, small things like, well, it's not a small thing, but things like crime and the state of the general economy and the way people live obviously also affects us, because we deal with staff that maybe come from underprivileged backgrounds. Sometimes we end up with staff that are desperate, and sometimes they can't help their urges and end up taking advantage of the business. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other countries in the world, but these are some of the challenges that we face as entrepreneurs, especially in the retail space in South Africa. And I mean, lastly, which is quite an important point for last, I think there's the skills shortage and availability in South Africa is, I think, fundamental to the challenges that we face. Like we as a business love upskilling people, and we love taking people and growing them within our business. But it is very challenging finding staff that do have an understanding of the industry that they're going into, and also to ensure that they have some basic education. I mean, just generally the caliber of people that you looking at, whether it be in your head office, whether it be accounting, or whether it be bookkeeping or web development, or whether it be in your factory where it comes to someone that's baking or making parts of the ice cream, or whether it be people in your store that are capable of engaging with your staff and sort of interacting with them in a way that you would sort of ideally want them to engage with your staff with, can also be a challenging one. So I think across the board is, I think, a lot of potential for growth amongst staff, but it takes a huge amount of nurturing, and it's very difficult to find people without having to put huge amounts of effort into them, which I guess at the end of the day is rewarding, because if you do find someone that's a gem and you nurture and nourish them, you are contributing extensively to the country and to them, but it does put a lot more strain under the people in the business and the business as a whole.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely understand that. And then you also said that there are, while there are several challenges, there are also many opportunities. So what do you think are the opportunities that are unique to South Africa?
The business, Paul started as a hobby for me. It was something that I saw a gap in the market. I was 21, it was very young. And I guess I was lucky to have traveled quite a bit during my childhood and my teens. And I realized this was like, South Africa was quite different 10 years ago. I mean, we weren't as, we weren't as worldly. We didn't have exposure to the same products. Instagram and Facebook and TikTok didn't even exist. Were a lot smaller communities and networks. And I sort of realized at that point that there was a gap in the market for a good quality ice cream. And we didn't have anything that could really compete with the product I was making at that time in very, very small batches. And I think in a lot of countries up until then, or places around the world, a product like mine would have been something that was available many years ago. And due to a number of factors, the market was very limited here. And there was just, and it still is quite limited. And maybe that's because there aren't a lot of people that either have the funds to do something like it, they don't have the energy, they don't have the interest, they don't have the appetite. These things take a huge amount of effort and time. It's not thinking that you're going to have an ice cream business. It sounds very simple, but it's actually very complicated. And I think that you can see that something that's a very simple idea in a country where there wasn't much competition allowed us to grow something reasonably successfully over the past few years. And I think that was obviously a huge opportunity.
Yeah, especially in the ice cream space, I think there's definitely a lot more like sort of gourmet ice cream stuff in places like Europe than here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Part of the culture.
Yeah.
I mean, coffee and alcohol and snacks and all these types of food items have started picking up over the past couple of years. But there's a lot. Obviously, number one, there's the smaller target market. But number two, there are a lot less players in the market.
Yeah. So you definitely think that there's sort of opportunity simply because there are areas that haven't been explored yet, in a sense. Okay. So my second last question for you is that if you knew that every young person in South Africa, or even every young person on the continent, was listening to this podcast right now, what would you want to say to them?
I would say, do what you love. I mean, it's a very cliched thing, but like I don't know anything else. I mean, I obviously studied. I went to Vass. I went to university, and obviously did my studies, and I'd never actually had another job. But I think it's been very rewarding to build something from the ground up and completely from scratch. I think a lot of people it takes a lot of courage, and you end up sacrificing a lot. But at the end of the day, I love what I do, and I've been able to grow something and seek the rewards for taking that plunge and making those sacrifices. So I think life is short, and I think too many people unfortunately do things that they don't enjoy day to day. And although one does make lots of sacrifices when they start their own business, whether it be financially or in terms of relationships, or whether it be, I don't know, not being able to do things that all your other friends are doing. You have to, at the end of the day, enjoy what you're doing. So I think it's a lesson for everyone, because I think a lot of people, they do things for maybe just for the financial rewards, and they hate what they're doing every day. And it's actually quite sad to see that. Not to say that you have to do what you do. You have to start something from scratch, or that you have to do your own thing. But I think I'm not saying that there aren't times that we don't love what we're doing. We all have those moments where we self-reflect and be like, oh my God, I hate what I'm doing now, but that's life. But I think it's important to just be mindful of what you're doing and reflect and question and try and be in a situation where you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. And then, so my very last question for you is, what are your top 3 favorite ice cream flavors?
Mine or the company's?
Well, that's up to you.
We don't make it, but one of my favorites is a real classic, is pistachio, roasted pistachio. We don't make it because it's a very expensive flavor to make, and there's actually only a handful of pistachio farmers in South Africa. Most of it's imported, but it's a real classic, and I really love it. Another one of my favorite flavors is a flavor that we're currently offering, which is a vegan brownie cookie dough. Sorry, it's a vegan brownie. So it's actually an oat milk ice cream. With vegan brownie, chocolate fudge swirl. It's really good. And I think my last favorite flavor would be a flavor that we made quite recently, which was white chocolate and rooibos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is a couple months ago. It was a really good flavor.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I've actually heard people talk about the brownie one. I think that's a favorite that I've heard. But yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you again so much for taking some time to chat with me. It's been really insightful and interesting, and yeah, hopefully we'll get to chat again at some stage. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that it brought you tremendous value. If it did, please share it and subscribe or follow this podcast for updates about new episodes. Thanks and goodbye.